When Congress delegates authority to executive branch agencies through statutes, they usually spell out what they want the agency to do, but they often trust the agency, often expressly, to fill in the gaps in a few places, and sometimes they will specifically authorize either the agency director or the attorney general to make certain key decisions about how the new policy or program should be implemented. And there's a little bit of uncertainty at the boundaries or blurry lines about how much discretion to someone like the attorney general is too much. That's the subject of the case we're going to be talking about here, which is Gundy versus United States. This is a U.S. Supreme Court case from 2019 about the sex offender registry statute and a party that brought a non-delegation challenge to that statute. So let's dive in. This case involved a challenge to the Sex Offender Registration and Notification Act, which is abbreviated SORNA, especially 34 U.S.C. Section 209(13)D, you don't have to remember that, as a violation of the non-delegation doctrine. In terms of who wrote the opinion or the breakdown of the court, Justice Kagan wrote the majority opinion, joined by Justices Ginsburg, Breyer, and Sotomayor, and upheld the statute, and Justice Alito concurred in this. In terms of the factual background, Gundy was an individual whose conviction as a sex offender predated the statute, and he argued that SORNA unconstitutionally delegated legislative authority or power to the Attorney General by authorizing the Attorney General to specify the applicability of SORNA retroactively to sex offenders convicted before SORNA's enactment. Now, as you can imagine, the fact that people who were committed and maybe had completed their sentences before the statute was passed would then have to comply with the sex offender registry raised a number of controversial legal concerns about ex post facto laws and things like that. In this case, we're really just talking about whether letting the Attorney General decide how and how much to apply this retroactively was an excessive delegation of legislative authority. So let's see what the court did. This opinion reiterated the court's long-established standard that a statutory delegation is constitutional as long as Congress includes, quote, an intelligible principle to which the person or body authorized to exercise the authority is directed to conform. And if you wanted a line in your case to highlight, that would be a good one, where the court is reiterating the validity of the intelligible principle standard in 2019. The opinion noted that the Attorney General's discretion under this statute isn't boundless. It's limited to requiring pre-act offenders just to register as soon as feasible. In other words, this meant that the Attorney General should specify how to apply SORNA if transitional difficulties required delays. And so, in other words, when Congress passes a statute, there's a lot of work to do that's going to take months and sometimes years for an agency to create the program and to staff it and to promulgate the regulations and protocols and rules. If there's an online aspect like a website or online forms, to get those drafted and approved and ready and posted and make sure everything works and so on. And one of the issues was what we would do with the huge number of people whose convictions were before the act. So once the program's set up, it's easier to deal with new people that are convicted of sex crimes going forward. But what do you do with the huge number of people up till now? And that is what presents the feasibility issues that the Attorney General was going to have to decide how to work that out. SORNA's express purpose is to establish a comprehensive national system for sex offender registration. Many pre-enactment offenders were already out of prison, and it was really complicated to find all of them immediately and register them. Believe it or not, the government doesn't keep tabs on where every American is at all times. On the other hand, you don't want to have a situation where the executive branch decides it's just too hard to deal with the people who committed their crimes before the statute altogether, because that would undermine or thwart the purpose of the statute. If, for example, to give the extreme scenario, the Attorney General had decided to exempt all prior sex offenders, that would basically undermine the idea of having a comprehensive national database of registered sex offenders. So, given what I've just explained, the plurality here said that the SORNA statute actually did satisfy the intelligible principle test that had been established long ago in the J.W. Hampton case. Why? Because Congress had defined the policy goal, which was comprehensive registration, and the boundaries, which was practical feasibility, leaving the Attorney General only the task of filling in the details or figuring out how to do that within those parameters. Justice Alito provided the crucial fifth vote to uphold the statute, but solely on the grounds of stare decisis. Significantly, he wrote that he would be willing to revisit and potentially overturn the court's somewhat permissive non-delegation precedents like Mistretta and other cases over the last few decades in a future case where a majority of the court that is seated at the time is ready to do so. Justice Gorsuch wrote a dissent in this case that two other justices joined, Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Thomas. And this is, in some ways, the famous part of the case is Gorsuch's dissent, where he argued that the statute was unconstitutional because he said that this particular statutory section that gives the Attorney General this power is really giving him the power to write his own criminal code by unilaterally deciding whether pre-act offenders would face criminal liability for not registering by a certain date. So he said that this did violate the non-delegation doctrine. Justice Gorsuch called for a return to a stricter understanding of Article 1, suggesting that Congress can only delegate the authority to maybe fill in details and define facts that trigger a rule or perform non-legislative executive duties. Why is this case so significant? Well, the case is widely taught in administrative law courses, not so much for the plurality's holding that, or the outcome that the statute is survives, but for signaling a potential shift in the Supreme Court's views of the non-delegation doctrine overall. I want you to see here for my students that when we talk about the Attorney General filling in the details, that's a little bit in the eye of the beholder. Like, where does the line, the majority thinks that is all the Attorney General is doing under the statute, is making some practical decisions about how to do things, filling in the details. And for the dissent, they think this is something much more significant, that the Attorney General essentially gets to write part of the law, and that crosses a line, but it's not completely clear where that line is. With Justice Alito's concurrence in this case, and then Justice Kavanaugh, who later joined the court and made statements in other cases agreeing with Gorsuch's dissent in the Gundy case, there appears to be a willingness among at least 5 or maybe 6 of the justices to revive the non-delegation doctrine the way it was in the late 1930s and impose stricter limits on congressional delegations to federal agencies. And that concludes our discussion about Gundy versus United States. Thanks for watching.